Welcome back to another edition of the podcast, and tonight is our playoff final preview and overall National League review of the 23-24 National League season. Once again, to your left-hand side, I am joined by Paul. It's been a few weeks, hasn't it, Paul, since we last had you on the podcast. Paul, firstly, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, mate. I'm good. In one way, relieved the season is over, but another way, looking forward to obviously it starting again in not so many weeks, and this crazy off season of retain lists and potential transfers and where players might go to, who's been released by clubs higher that might drop in and do a job for your club. So yeah, it's that sort of silly season, isn't it now? But while the players and managers have a little bit of a rest before they go again for next year.
Yeah, of course. We did the game week predictions throughout the season. Paul, unfortunately for you, fortunately for me, I managed to win, and I'm going to brag a little bit, quite convincingly towards the end as well. Barnet Clobber, you'll be wearing that, I'm guessing, on next podcast for those who are interested by that.
Yeah. Obviously, we'll find out by the weekend who pops into the National League and who departs us to go up to the EFL. And the pod where we reflect on the season as a whole, and then maybe going into next season, who might be facing who. And I might be donning some clothing from a club just up the road from us.
Yeah, I'll be looking forward to that podcast. But tonight, anyway, we are going to preview obviously the playoff final, review the season, maybe look at a few of the sides heading into next season. Of course, we're 3 months away from the next campaign. However, I've seen a lot of people on Twitter still starting to discuss it, who they think could be early favourites for next season. Of course, sides entering the division, we know who've come down. We know, I think, 2 of the 4 sides coming up next season as well. So it's certainly going to be an interesting podcast. And to do that, I'm delighted to say we are joined by 2 guests tonight to join us. Firstly, we have got Max Kretzschmar, of course, Wealdstone attacking midfielder, certainly one of the stars in the Vanarama National League. Max, firstly, how are you doing?
Hello, guys. I'm all right. I'm good. I'm glad to be on.
Yeah, it's been a long time, hasn't it, Max, since we last had you on the podcast. It's good to get your insight into tonight's show. Of course, we'll be previewing the final. It'll be interesting to see what your take is on the 2 sides and who your favourites will be. But also tonight, I'm delighted to say we are joined by a Bromley fan, of course, from Bromley with love, Machel. Machel, firstly, how are you doing tonight? Nervous ahead of Sunday, I suppose?
Do you know what? I figured you'd ask me if I was nervous. Luckily, work's been so busy this week that I really haven't had a chance to think properly about the final, which is probably the best way to approach it. I think the first time I'll properly give it thought is the Saturday, the night before the game itself, and then obviously the day itself. Nervous at this point in time? No. There are some concerns which I'll discuss, I'm sure, at some point about what happens to either side should they lose the final, though. So there is that.
Right, we'll have a look at the live chat then, see what people are saying. Dobbs, who's coming in and said, bottle of the sheet houses tonight. Yeah, potentially, you might say. We've had Mr. Lucas come in. All right, gents, looking forward to our upcoming FA Trophy final against Solihull Moors. Let's hope they go to extra time and lose on pens in the playoff final. Thanks for the content this season, though. Thank you very much. That could be something that we discuss maybe. Of course, Solihull Moors haven't only just got the visit to Wembley this Sunday. The following week, they'll be back for the FA Trophy final. I think we all know which one they would much rather win. Do you think Solihull will take that into account in any way? Max, I'll come to you first.
I mean, it's an incredible season to go there twice. Obviously, they beat us in the quarterfinals on penalties. So, I mean, they've had penalties before. No extra time in the FA Trophy. So, obviously, that's a little bit different when it comes to the playoff final. But as a team, yeah, listen, they've been excellent this season, consistent in the league. Below Bromley, however, obviously they've made a run in the cup. So I think that shows over 2 different competitions how, such a strong side they are.
Machel, do you see this as being beneficial, or do you think it could be detrimental going into this playoff campaign?
I mean, Fylde did this, back in, I can't remember the year, was it 2018? I think they lost to Salford in the playoff final and then beat Orient in the trophy final. And Fylde kind of didn't show up in the playoff final, and then the trophy became their big thing. If Solihull hadn't made it to the final, undoubtedly, I mean, they beat us. Let's not forget they beat Bromley in the semi-finals of the trophy to get to the trophy final. And the way they celebrated that day, and rightly so, it was a big thing. It was their first ever trip to Wembley. If they hadn't, that was before they would have navigated beating Halifax and Barnet, right? So I think at that point in time, and the way they celebrated it was, oh my God, we're going to Wembley. This never happened before. This is great. I just wonder how they're going to navigate it now that they're actually going to Wembley twice. They should, in theory, see the second one as it's a free hit, whatever, let's get over the line in the league. But when it's your first trip to Wembley, that's not necessarily so easy to deal with the whole magnitude of the Wembley experience. And it's going to be interesting to see how they deal with it. We've done it before, twice in the last 7 seasons, and I will maintain this. So obviously, let's see what happens on Sunday. But the one thing I'm not nervous about is any fears of our players being overwhelmed by the occasion. The spine of our team went 2 years ago. Byron Webster, Corey Whiteley, Michael Cheek, they were all there when we beat Wrexham in the trophy final. So I don't see this being a significantly overwhelming experience for a lot of the Bromley squad.
Paul, I want to come to you. Of course, when you're looking into this, how do you see it then for Solihull Moors? Do you see it as perhaps a distraction, having to visit the following week? I know as me as a Halifax fan, when I see if Halifax win both finals, I probably would say I don't care about the FA Trophy. The main focus is getting over the line, like Machel said, into the Football League, because I think that is the dream for all our clubs. The FA Trophy, yes, is nice, but I think more it's about the visit to Wembley than actually winning the trophy, where I think getting promoted to the EFL, it's more, I don't think about being at Wembley. You think about actually the dream of getting into the Football League.
No, I agree. And I think that there's as much of a burden on that with Bromley. As Machel said, they've been to Wembley. They've had that spine of the FA Trophy winning team. There's a different expectation when you win the playoff. You've got an EFL position at stake, and that may be what is the pressure on Bromley. They're probably not going to get a better chance than they have this weekend in the last few years, no matter how strong they've been and dominant they've been in both competitions. So, I mean, Solihull, they're going into this on the back of a really good run of form. You know, from when they played us in the trophy quarterfinals, where, you know, on another day Wealdstone would have beaten them, and we wouldn't even be talking about this going to Wembley twice in a week. It was just they had a bit of luck and we didn't, and you know, good luck to them. So that they're playing on a massive amount of good form. That, you know, when we saw them at Barnet on Saturday, they absolutely steamrolled Barnet. Barnet, I know, didn't show up, but you've got to give them an awful lot of credit. They exposed the weaknesses that Barnet showed. They exposed the fact that Barnet didn't show up. And if Bromley do the same, Solihull will pick them off, because they're a very efficient side, a very, very efficient side. There is nothing interesting and exciting about them. You know, Max has played against them. He'll probably tell you the same. You probably couldn't name any one of their players as being a standout candidate in the league. But as a team, they're unbelievably efficient and consistent. And fair play to them. I backed them to go down this year because they had a real churn of players at the back end of last year. They got a new manager in, a new director of football that's not even experienced at this level, and they've done remarkably well.
I see Solihull and Bromley, and I see a lot of similarities in the way that they play. I don't know what you guys think of that. Max, maybe coming to you. Of course, you're someone who's played against both sides on the pitch. What do you make of both sides when you've actually played against them this season?
The thing that strikes me about both teams, and they have it similarly, like they're just all, it seems on the pitch, they're very experienced, very know what they're doing. They're in a rigid shape. And like you said, Paul said, Solihull can spring on a counter-attack. Bromley maybe a bit more direct than Solihull, but just as effective. You know, Cheek scores 25, 20 every season. But you look at their, look throughout their team. You got Osborne, experience, probably their best player. Obviously, Sabara has been ill towards the beginning of the season. But you look through the Bromley team, people, like we said, have been there, done that. They've done it at Wembley with the same manager as well, which I think Machel obviously didn't mention, but he said the players have been there. That's really helpful. The manager's been there and won there as well. And that's a huge thing. So it'll be kind of familiar maybe when they get it. But yeah, Bromley a bit more direct, both really effective. But I just think defensively, they're very, very good. Both teams, they know what they're doing and they're comfortable without the ball just as well as they are with the ball.
Yes, certainly. Machel, I want to get your take on the actual game between, of course, Bromley and Altrincham. Now, going into that game, I think it shows the character. You had that scare. Altrincham took the lead. Altrincham, I think, did have an opportunity to go 2-0 up. But the way that Bromley just tore them apart in that 10 minutes showed to me why, for me, I think they're worthy of potentially being promoted this season. I think both sides, it is a case of who turns up on the day between these two sides. They've both got the experience of being in finals before. Solihull, of course, lost to Grimsby a few years ago. Of course, Bromley, they win the FA Trophy final as well and have had a number of playoff campaigns themselves where they've lost. But, Machel, I want to get what your take is on that game. But then, secondly, I noticed that you did speak to Andy Woodman. What did he have to say on the whole situation?
I think if I start with Andy first, internally, I don't know how publicised it's been in the league and what other clubs or supporters have picked up coming out of Bromley, but I can tell you that internally, the target all season was finish inside the top 3. Whether Bromley had the team or the budget to do that is another question altogether. But Robin Stanton-Gleaves, who's the chairman, is very ambitious. And after we had lost to Chesterfield last season in the playoff semi-final in extra time, there was very much a sense at Bromley that, right, we've lost Wrexham, we've lost Notts County, Chesterfield are definitely going to win the league. I think everyone in the league knew that was going to happen. But the kind of think tank behind the scenes at Bromley said second and third is open to anybody in the league who shows the requisite level of consistency. There's a few people looking at Oldham, but obviously that was when they had Unsworth as manager and they just squandered all their money. York squandered all their money. But there was this sense that second and third was up for grabs, and that if you could get second or third and guarantee yourself a home tie, you would have a significant advantage. So at this point in time, Bromley behind the scenes will say we've achieved what we wanted, which was get second and third, win the home playoff, and get to Wembley. And internally, that's probably what they were targeting. Andy Woodman is a very savvy manager who probably, I still maintain, doesn't get the credit he deserves in this league. Bromley are one of the least fashionable clubs in this league. And I think because we've been so consistent over the last 3 or 4 or 5, however many years it is, people are take things that Bromley do for granted as if we're one of the bigger clubs in the league. We're just very consistent. And Andy was very kind of, at full time, he was very much like, okay, yeah, this is good, but this isn't what the season was about. We're supposed to win at Wembley. And that probably speaks to what his mentality is like. There was no significant celebration. There was no sense of, wow, this is amazing. It was very much, okay, part 1's out the way. Now let's go finish part 2. In terms of the game itself and Altrincham, it panned out pretty much the way Bromley's games have panned out all season against teams who play good football. And I'll include lots of teams there, even Max as a Wealdstone player. Wealdstone play good football. Gateshead, Altrincham, just to pick some of the better footballing sides in the league, right? Aldershot, right? A lot of these teams who play good football, when they come up against teams like Bromley, and this isn't to disparage the good footballing sides in the league, Bromley are happy to just let those teams have the ball. They're happy to sit in low blocks, banks of 4, and say, have the ball, let's see what you can do. And largely speaking, and this is the key thing about Bromley, and what a lot of people have forgotten, they've got the second best defence in the league. And if you're defensively rigid and you don't concede many goals, no matter how good a football side is, you've got Michael Cheek. you're always going to do something. You're always going to get a set piece. You're always going to get that opportunity. And when you arguably have the most consistent striker in the league in your arsenal, that the teams who have a lot of the ball better do something with it, because Bromley are inevitably going to get some opportunities at some point in time and take them. And that's what I felt happened with Altrincham. They had a lot of the ball in the first half. They took the lead. And yes, there were some nervy moments, but there was always that sense of, if Bromley do get up head of steam, though, it's going to be very difficult for Altrincham to stop them. I didn't expect 3 goals in 10 minutes, but it probably speaks to what Bromley are like as a football side. The Altrincham were, I haven't seen it in a long time, where a side is visibly shell-shocked at what has actually gone. You could literally see it in the Altrincham players after the second went in as to, what the hell's going on? How are Bromley ahead of us when they haven't even been the better team in the game? And that speaks to Bromley. if you see what I mean, all of a sudden they're in the lead and the opposition can't quite work out how that took place, if that makes sense.
It's so annoying when that happens as well. It's so frustrating. And you're spot on. You're completely right. A set piece. I mean, we played you, I think, second or third game of the season at your place on a Tuesday night. It could have been one of our best 90-minute performances, like, out there. And obviously we drew the game. And at Wembley, on a big pitch, you need to be comfortable without the ball. You are going to have spells. You're playing in a final. The other team's going to be a decent team, and they are. So you need to be, and that could be a really crucial asset coming into that final.
Max, how do you prepare? Because obviously you're a player. I'm guessing you've been in playoff campaigns in the past. I'm sure you've been in a few finals as well. How do you prepare as a player when you've got a final like this? You know, you're on a high. For example, Bromley are on a high after winning the semi-final. Solihull on a high, but then it's straight back down to work because the job's only half done. So how does a player prepare for a final like this? And do you think players get nervous, or do you think it just depends on the type of character that you are?
I think in my first couple, I got very nervous and it affected my performance a little bit. But you always have the balance. Like, do you treat it as every other game because you've just done 46 games in a row and that's works for you because you've got into the playoffs? But then your mind's hanging, this is our last game of the season. This is the one we've been playing for, like Machel said. So it's always balancing those two. Do you treat it like every other game, or do you put a little bit more on it? And then that's where your kind of pent up nerves come in. Listen, both teams have got really experienced players, like you said. Webster's been there, done it. Corey Whiteley, these kind of players. And Solihull the same. Osborne, I think, one of the best players in the league all season. Been there, done it. And it will just be not like another game, but they will treat it as such because, yes, the magnitude of the game is huge, but you kind of have to stick to the process of what makes me a good player, what makes us a good team, and, stick to the game plan, and hopefully you come out on top.
Paul, I just want to get your take then on Solihull. Of course, you look at Solihull, of course, the quarterfinals against Halifax, I think tore them apart, to be honest. Personally, as a Halifax fan, I think for 20 minutes we were awful and conceded some awful goals. But I think overall Solihull were just a lot better than us, in my opinion, but got the job done there. Then going to Barnet and putting 4 past Barnet, that speaks volumes about them. Of course, now into a final. How would you just sum up the way that they've been playing in these playoffs so far?
Well, they're clearly not scared of anything. They've had to go away to the second strongest team in the league, as it states on paper, and made them look very ordinary. And I suppose it's just a case of they're probably playing with no fear because, as Max just said, do you take it as every other game, or do you take it? Is it different? And they're almost like taking it in their stride and continuing with that consistency that they've had throughout the season. I think they started the season off being unbeaten in the first 10, 15 games. And Andy Wing has kept a consistent squad. I don't think they've really had that much of a change. And it's helped them, the familiarity of the way they play. They've got more comfortable with each other. Like I said, I commentated on the Wealdstone Solihull game at the back end of last season, and Solihull had decided that they were going to probably, clear the decks and get new players in. They had a lot of youngsters in. There was lads that had come in from the lower leagues, and they didn't look like the Solihull that we were used to. And from memory, I think we played them quite comfortably, didn't we, Max? And I was really concerned for them because they just lost Neil Ardley. They didn't, they'd lost a few of their players. They were recruiting from the leagues below, and all of a sudden, Solihull had been fairly consistent, like Bromley, throughout the last few years. Are they going to be the ones that suffer? And to bring in Andy Wing and to bring in new director of football, the Irish lad Steve, I can't remember his surname, it's gone out of my head. And to be able to recruit like they did and to start like they did was incredible. And the same has got to be said for Andy Woodman. Machel's touched on the fact he's a very, very good manager, doesn't get the credit he deserves. They lost a few key players at the back end of the last season into the pre-season. And we went down there to watch them. Again, I went down there to watch against Wealdstone. Max played in the game. And if you told me that Bromley were going to be in the top 3 after seeing that performance and the way Bromley had started, they've held their nerve as well. The ownership's held their nerve. They haven't twisted and gone, well, Woodman's take him as far as he could. He blooded some of those youngsters, the likes of Crowhouse, who scored against Wealdstone, he's going to go on and do better things. A few other positions where he's got youngsters in, and they've absolutely blossomed. And they play to a game plan that is very, very effective. Two of those 3 goals on Saturday against Altrincham. If you didn't know who was playing in that game, you'd say it was Bromley, because that's how they play, and they've absolutely shell-shocked Altrincham into losing. And I've watched them play a number of times over the years against Wealdstone, both home and away. You can't shake them off. You can't. They keep coming back. I mean, we drew 3-3 with them a couple of years ago. We were up 3 times. We couldn't shake them off, and that's what Bromley are like. And if Solihull come out and play like they did against Barnet, it's going to be a very, very good game. If Solihull come out and aren't at it, I think Bromley are going to take the advantage of that.
Zach's come in and said here, with respect to Solihull, they have played very well in their current playoff game, but you can argue their opposition didn't turn up. If Bromley turn up, how will that play out? Machel, maybe I want to come to you for this, but just firstly, just my opinion on that. I think how I see it is more of the fact they actually did a job on Barnet in a way than Barnet not turn. I think the way they played didn't suit Barnet, and Barnet didn't know what to do. And I think that was probably the case in a number of games this season with Solihull. They're a horrible side to play, not because they're particularly fit. You come away from that game thinking they were miles better than you. And I think it might be the same with Bromley as well. Altrincham will probably say we had it there. We had an opportunity to win. But what Bromley and Solihull do is they find a way to win. And that's how I've seen it so far. Machel, what's your thoughts on this comment overall from a fellow Bromley fan?
Yeah, I know, Zach. I think Solihull are a good team. I mean, they're in the playoff final. You don't get there by accident. When they beat us in the trophy semi-final, which was at Bromley, the goals Bromley conceded that day were uncharacteristically sloppy. I'm trying to remember. I think, Whitmore, the centre-back, got both of them, and they were both from set pieces. It's not the type of goals, not the type of goals that Bromley concede, generally speaking. Mark Beck came on late on. He was a problem. I don't know how effective he would be on that massive Wembley pitch if Solihull have to turn to him at any point in time. But this is my theory. Okay, I could be wrong. Solihull are good because defensively they're quite strong. But at the same time, a lot of what makes Solihull good, similar to what makes Altrincham good, to be fair, is Solihull kind of play in that 4-2-3-1 shape. And it's that front 4 that on the counter, it's that front 4 that Solihull have that can be so problematic. So it'll be Joe Sabara, Jamie Osborne, Tyrese Shade, and then probably Tavon Campbell would be up front. You would imagine that's how they're going to line up. I'll be shocked if that's not what they do. I think, and I think it was Max who made mention of it, I personally believe if you shut down Jamie Osborne, you go a long way to shutting down Solihull. That's my personal belief. He's kind of like the metronome of that side. If you let him dictate the pace, if you let him dictate the pace of the game, Solihull get on top, and they get on top quite quickly. I think he's the one who brings everyone into play. So you would imagine that for Bromley to go head-to-head with Solihull, it's all about, and this is what we did when we beat them 3-0 the week after we lost in the trophy. why Bromley was so good that day is they effectively suffocated the midfield. And it meant that Osborne couldn't really get on the ball. Sabara couldn't really get on the ball. And Bromley were effective. And even Andy Wing pretty much admitted it at full time. He was like, Bromley just didn't let us settle at any point in time. So that's what's going to be quite intriguing, because Andy Wing's no fool. He would have looked back at that 3-0 and said, okay, that's what Bromley did, and we couldn't get going. You now have the dynamics of the huge Wembley pitch. I think it has to be a much slower game on that huge Wembley pitch. And actually something that none of us have mentioned yet, and something that Andy Woodman prides himself on, Andy believes that Bromley are the fittest team in the league. And that may, if that's true, he's always said it, and he thinks that's why we always are so, like Paul said, that's why we're so nagging to put away, because we're still going even late into the game. If that stuff matters, it probably plays a significant role in the latter stages in that game at Wembley. But ultimately, to answer Zach's question, you have to get control of the midfield. You have to be able to stop Solihull playing through Jamie Osborne. That for me is step one.
We'll come back to the live chat. I know a few people have put their thoughts in. Everyone, please put your opinions in. I know there's a lot of people watching on Twitter. We've put a poll out on YouTube for those that want to predict who they think is going to win. Also, actually put your actual predictions in the comments. I don't know if you can do it on Twitter or not, but of course you definitely can on YouTube. So head over there if you are on Twitter and you're wanting to get involved in the live chat. But what I want to talk about a few individuals for both teams. We've mentioned Jamie Osborne there. Max, of course, you're someone who's played against him probably a number of times now. What do you think of him? And is there anyone else in that Solihull team for you that sticks out? Of course, there's Sabara as well, but anyone potentially none of us would usually think of when, of course, you're playing.
I tell you what's so deceiving when you play against him, and obviously Machel's like hit the nail on the head on the ball, brilliant, like keeps it ticking. He can carry the ball as well. Like, he's 31 years old. He's quite stocky. I won't say stocky, but he's not thin. He's not like a runner or anything like that. He's got this change of pace, which you just don't expect when he's like driving. You've seen some of his goals and his assists, or being involved in play in the goals recently in the playoffs and towards the end of the season. He's just got that ability just to stop a defender, glide away and have a shot. So he's got that too fine. If you go really tight to him, he can go around you, move you, or play it off quickly. So he's got that like multifaceted game. I think obviously, Luke, your boy Tavon Campbell, you was digging out early on in the season, not having him from Rochdale last season. He's been on flames. Obviously, he had a few injury trouble. Well, not a few. He had a pretty, it's effectively a broken toe at Wealdstone that he was playing with a lot. He's finally got that fixed, which he had that from Rochdale. And listen, if you give Tav the ball in the box, he will score. I've not played with too many when they have their back to goal who can swivel and shoot. So a lot of his goals, I think, when he moved from Wealdstone, well, obviously back to his parent club and then to Solihull, were like tap-ins. I think he had like 5 and 6 or 6 and 6 goal involvements in his first 6 games. A lot again from set pieces, which we said Bromley was strong from, but Solihull are too. So listen, I think he's in very good form. He scored 2 in the playoffs already. Jamie Osborne, we've mentioned. And obviously they've got Maycock back, so them two together, Maycock and Osborne, just a lot of experience, a lot of energy, and both really good on the ball. So as we said, the pattern of the game, I would expect Solihull to dominate the ball a little bit more than Bromley, but as we said, both teams can be dangerous without the ball too.
Paul, I quickly want to just come to you. If you're a Solihull fan, as we don't have anyone to particularly represent Solihull tonight, how do you think Solihull need to approach this game? We look overall, Solihull won in the FA Trophy at Bromley. They drew at home to Bromley. In the league, they lost 3-0 to Bromley away. How do you think Solihull need to approach this game going into Sunday?
They need to show an efficiency across the park. They're going to have to take their chances. Bromley will not give them many. So the chances they get, they're going to have to take them, because like we said before, Bromley will come at you and they'll come at you and they'll come at you. So I think it's going to be important for that front four, as Machel said, is to get them going. Max is right. Tav scored a textbook Tav goal against Bromley at the beginning of the season, where he sort of took it back to goal, shifted it one way, turned the other bottom corner, and someone like him has to take those chances because Bromley will just keep coming. They'll just keep coming. And that big pitch, the restarts, the fact they use those, they use that diagonal ball very well, don't they, Machel? Left to right, right to left. Solihull just got to be efficient and on it for 90 minutes. And the interesting thing is, Tav Campbell can't play in the FA Trophy final because he's cup tied. So you'd like to think he'll put in a really good shift on the playoff final, get them into the Football League. That's where he's come from as an example. So there's a lot to play for. And I think Solihull just have to keep doing what they're doing and probably learn from that 3-0 defeat, as Machel said, and stop Bromley playing and force them back, not the other way around.
Machel, going into this game then, of course, you said at the start you have got a few concerns going into Sunday. Do you want to just discuss a few of those
now? So last time I was on your show, I said to you that the game I was actually afraid of was the Altrincham game. I wasn't really afraid of the final. I've kind of maintained all season that if Bromley get to Wembley in the final, we'll win the final and get promoted. Now we're actually there. I'm concerned that I said it. Listen, it's a huge occasion, and I think my biggest concern, and actually before I say this, because we've got 2 Wealdstone links here, I just want to say that Ashley Charles has really grown into his role at Bromley. He went from a team at Wealdstone who play really good football to Bromley who play a different kind of way. And people were initially critical of him because he had to find his role in a new style of football. But he has been absolutely critical to how Bromley have played in Armour Field. So I just want to shout out Ashley Charles. But the thing that I'm concerned about actually involves Andy Woodman. If Bromley don't get promoted, I think bigger clubs come in for him, and I think he goes. And I think the club shouldn't. I think the club shouldn't stand in his way. When you look at his resume, playoffs, FA Trophy winners, playoff eliminators, FA Trophy winners, playoff semi-final, playoff final. Come on. Like if you're a club in League Two, for example, and you're now looking for a manager, I think he's probably paid his dues. Obviously, for Bromley to keep Andy, we have to get promoted, I would think. If we don't, and he has to go again, that energy to go again is, I know Chesterfield just did it, but it's not easy. It's not easy to, rebuild your squad again. We're going to lose Ben Crowhouse. He's gone to Brentford. Rebuild your squad again. You've gone to play a final, so your retained list is coming out later than everybody else. You're going to have to go back through the whole loan system again. Like, it's hard to motivate yourself again in that situation. And I wouldn't begrudge Andy if he looked at, if it was a defeat and he looked around and said, I've taken Bromley as far as I possibly can. It's time for a new challenge. So that's my biggest fear, that we could end up losing our manager if we don't go up. Obviously, if we do go up, well, there's no problem. He's going to create history, take the club into the Football League and so on and so forth. But there will be a lot of eyes on Bromley at that Wembley final. And he's going to do a lot of press. And if people didn't know his resume before, they'll know it on that Wembley day. And they'll be like, wait a minute. Shouldn't we be making a move? Gillingham already tried it a couple of seasons ago, so it's not like I'm saying something that hasn't already been tried. So that's my fear, Luke, that we could be down a manager if we don't get this done.
I think what I see with both sides, this is I think we saw Chesterfield losing the final last year. Notts County were the all-round favourites throughout the playoffs and going into that final as well. Chesterfield on another day probably would have won. However, Chesterfield had resources that no other side in the league has by a country mile. The only other side that were anywhere near them was Oldham, and they've messed up this season and not really given them any trouble whatsoever. But for Solihull and Bromley, yes, there's probably 2 of the most established clubs in this league, and this is why I think it makes it such a good final from a different perspective. I know some people have actually been, criticising it. We've had 1 or 2 comments as well saying it's quite an underwhelming final. But what I find interesting about this final is both sides have been in this division for a very long time. They're probably two of the most longest-serving clubs. However, neither of them have ever got to the Football League, so it means so much to both clubs and everything they do off the field. But Bromley and Solihull, for the losers, whoever it is, don't have the resources, I don't think, to go again around the playoffs. You know, we saw Solihull when they lost to Grimsby. The following season, they finished 15th. I could see something similar happening to the losers of this final. And if you actually look at the finals, the losers of finals overall in the playoffs in the National League, runners-up very rarely have a good season the season after. Fylde lost in the playoff final following season, got relegated. You know, there's quite a trend, I think, going around here. If you actually look, the only side that have done well is Chesterfield. And I think just coming back to, Machel, what you're saying about Andy Woodman, you know, there's been links before between him and Gillingham. I know Gillingham, there's a vacancy open there now, I believe. That's one thing that might concern me going into this final for Bromley. And I don't, for 1 minute, think he won't be fully focused on the final because he's a man with experience. There's been rumours in the past and he's kind of brushed them aside. But when Pete Wild was the Halifax manager, and there's a bit of a link here, when we had the playoffs against Chesterfield, and this were the early stages of the playoffs a couple of seasons ago, the day before, there were news articles coming out about Pete Wild leaving to Hartlepool or Barrow. There were rumours. And I personally think that might have distracted him somehow in a way. Max, what do you think then going into this final for the losers, perhaps? I know it's a little negative, but it's something that I think we should speak about.
I wasn't aware of those stats. I mean, you've come up with 3 or 4 teams there, so it's obviously a trend. And like you said, I don't think you can classify Chesterfield when they lost that final. Like you said, they played well in it. The resources, the squad's like a League Two squad already. So that was not a surprise this season. Interesting. I mean, it is a huge bitter because at our level, Wembley does not come round a lot at all. Maybe if you're in, you know, well, full stop, it doesn't. Maybe in League Two, League One, whatever. If you're a Premier League player, obviously you've got multiple avenues to play at Wembley. Even a semi-final gets you at Wembley. So maybe a defeat at that kind of level, that once in a lifetime opportunity, can be devastating. And as we all know, because you've got that. You finished that high, you've got to the final, your players are going to be sought after from other clubs. Now, what Machel said earlier, they've got a lovely blend at Bromley from really experienced players to young loanees or really young. And then you've got your Ashley Charleses and these guys who have topped up in the middle. But before, it was like Bromley are very experienced, very old. Then it was early on the season, bloody hell, Bromley are very young and inexperienced. So they've got this great blend. Well, we don't know what's going to happen, but you can see, obviously, we've mentioned players like Crowhouse have gone already. So that's probably an element of it as well. When you do lose in a final, you've done well to get there. So your kind of squad is ripped out, let alone what you're talking about, your manager as well. That would just be awful.
Paul, I want to come to you because someone's actually put a comment on here. It wasn't that. Let me get it up now. Some folk had Solihull in for relegation at the beginning of the season. I'll hold my hands up. I had them like 17th, but it wasn't as bad as Paul. Paul, did you have them 21st, I believe?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, genuinely, they really, as I said, they surprised me at the back end of last season, and I know it was a dead rubber, and they were probably saving a bit of money and had let players go or not playing them for whatever it may be. I don't know, but they were a shadow of themselves. They really were, and you know, Neil Ardley, I think he was either the manager and left just after, or he just left. I can't remember which way around it was, but it certainly wasn't going too well for them, and it also appeared that was the funding going to stop, or was it reducing? You know, they got to a point, like Michel's talked about Bromley getting, you know, have they gone as far as they can? And now, you know, how much more do they invest to get that step further? And were they going to do it? And I just feared for them, probably because they weren't the most exciting team in the league anyway. You know, attracting players to somewhere like Solihull when there's other clubs that could attract you might have been a challenge, you know, from an outsider's point of view. So they've done amazingly well, you know, and I'll say, you know, I'll eat humble pie, and Andy Wing, who worked in National League North with Banbury, hadn't worked at National League. The director of football hadn't worked at National League level. So we've seen managers this year in our club at Wealdstone hasn't worked at National League, doesn't work. We've seen other managers where it doesn't quite work for them. So that was a big gamble. That was a really big gamble for Solihull to go in and do what they did and give Wing a chance. And he's more than paid them back. And they could end up doing a non-league double, which Wealdstone being the first team in 1985, they're going to follow them.
Right then, lads. Finally, then, I'm going to ask for how you feel the game is going to play out and your predictions. Paul, I'll come to you first. How do you see it going?
At the start of the playoff campaign, I said Bromley would win it all, and I've seen Solihull up close and personal the last couple of weeks against us at Wealdstone, and they're a good side, and they did well against Barnet. But I think Bromley are just going to be too strong for them, and will probably win 3-1.
Max, how do you see it going?
I see it much more lower scoring than that. I fancy, obviously, my tip was Barnet, actually. I thought Barnet were going to win the playoffs. Like I said, I think Solihull will have more of the ball. I think they'll control the game. It's difficult for me because, obviously, I'm friends with Charlesy, Oliver and Tavon. So I do think, and Machel reminded me of it earlier in the podcast, they've been there. They've done it. And Andy Woodman's done it. So I will say a boring 1-0 win, set piece, a long throw, something like that. Cheap, probably. Or you can't. That's what I'm going to go for. A low scoring 1-0 Bromley win, I think.
Now, the poll that we did on YouTube, it's very tight, actually. 52% of people are saying Bromley to win and 48% are saying Solihull to win. Someone's coming here and said 3-1 Solihull. Lots of people have put their predictions on Twitter as well that we'll look at afterwards and retweet those. Machel, how do you see it going then as a Bromley fan?
I mean, Solihull have put 4 past Halifax and 4 past Barnet. I refuse to believe, unless there's a sending off, that they can put four goals past Bromley. I just refuse to believe that. So I've got it down as only 1 goal in it. Whether it be 2-1 or whether it be 1-0, I don't see this being anybody romping home to victory. And it could literally go either way. If Solihull want to win this, their winning goal has to come late in the game. Even if they took the lead, I'd still think Bromley would come back at some point in the game. So their best way of winning this is whenever that winning goal comes in the game, and if it's them, it has to come as late as possible in the game. Whereas Bromley, I think, will create chances throughout the game at various different points. Not because they'll be overwhelming Solihull. I just think they will create chances at various points throughout the game. So I've got it as 2-1 or 1-0. Obviously, I'm a Bromley fan, so I'm going to have to say Bromley. But I think that's the scoreline will be on the day.
I think for me, finally, how I see it going, I think it'll be a very tight, low-scoring, cagey game, in my opinion. Certainly be nervous, I think, for both set of supporters. It won't, no team, I don't think they'll put a fair few past them. I think it'll be very low-scoring. I'm going to go 1-0 Bromley, but I could actually see it being a 0-0 and going to extra time and penalties. I think it's going to be very, very tight and very low scoring. So, yeah, it's certainly going to be a final, in my opinion, that I think for either side will mean so much, and maybe a little bit more than the other sides that have got promoted in the past. I know for every side, promotion is the dream, but because these two sides have been here for so long, the dream has always been to get into the EFL. In a way, it'd be like you've completed what your aims were to do, with what Bromley and Solihull have both done off the field in the last couple of years. Lads, it's been a pleasure to have you on once again tonight. Max, thank you for joining us once again. I'm sure we'll speak to you again very soon and have you back on the podcast.
No worries. Thanks for having me on.
No problem at all. Paul, thank you for being my co-host once again. It's been great to speak to you throughout the season. I know we're planning on doing probably one more show before we have a bit of a break during the off season.
Yeah, no, it's been another roller coaster ride for a lot of us in this the Vanna drama, and no, we've really I've enjoyed it, Luke. So thanks for having me on, and everyone that's interacted and listened and shared, etc. It's been great. So no, I've enjoyed it, and luckily Wealdstone stayed up, and unfortunately Halifax didn't go up. So we'll be back again next season.
Yeah, that was the first tweet I had to put out when we lost, to be honest, to look on the positive side. But Machel, once again, you'll be hoping you won't be joining us again on the podcast. So best of luck to you on Sunday. However, I wouldn't mind you coming on again in the future.
Yeah, you even saying that makes me realise just how ridiculous this is. That come Sunday I could be saying Bromley are a football league club, which makes absolutely. If you had told 14-year-old me that when I was watching Bromley in the Ryman 1 South, I think I would have told you you're absolutely crazy. So you know what? If I can, I'm just going to try and enjoy Sunday. And if we don't go up and we're back in the National League, we'll enjoy the ride once again. You know, we've got that, and you didn't even mention it. We've all got that new competition to play against Premier League under 21 sides. So you can talk about that in the next episode for sure.
Yeah, we certainly will be doing. But yeah, thank you once again, lads, for joining us. Thank you to everyone that's tuned in throughout the season. The support has been magnificent. Also, a massive thank you to our sponsors, Cards Accepted. If you use the link in the description, you'll get 50% off your card machine. They've agreed to sponsor us again for the 24-25 season. So very happy about that. So please check them out. There's a link in the description. For now, lads, I will see you next time. Bye for now.